Imagine a place so remote, so swallowed by the jungle, that even the maps barely acknowledge it. A concrete fortress buried deep in the dense rainforests of a classified Southeast Asian island, built during the height of modern counterinsurgency operations. In the early 2010s, U.S. forces established Forward Operating Base Echo, FOB Echo, as a strategic stronghold against insurgent networks. Surrounded by impenetrable vines, razor wire perimeters, and watchtowers peering through the canopy, it housed rotating units of soldiers tasked with patrols, intel gathering, and holding the line in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. But FOB Echo wasn't just a base. It was a haunted barracks. Soldiers who served there whispered about shadows that moved against the humidity, footsteps echoing in empty bays at night, and voices calling out in the dark. Official reports dismissed it as stress, isolation, or the constant hum of generators playing tricks on the mind. Yet, story after story emerged from those who rotated through. Unexplained cold spots in 100-degree heat, doors slamming in locked rooms, and figures in outdated uniforms watching from the tree line. Tonight, we're diving into the accounts of the men who lived it. These are their words, raw, unfiltered testimonies from soldiers who stood watch in those barracks. What happened at FOB Echo that made so many refuse second tours? Why did thousands cycle through its gates, but so few ever spoke of it again? And what lingers there now, long after the base was quietly decommissioned and reclaimed by the jungle? This is the siege history forgot, not one of bullets and bombs alone, but of something far older, far darker, that waited in the green hell. Chapter 1. Arrival in the green hell. I got to FOB Echo straight off a C-17 that had routed through half a dozen bases before dumping us on that short jungle strip. The second the ramp dropped, the air slammed into us, hot, heavy, saturated, like stepping into a steam room filled with rotting vegetation. We moved fast under the red lights of the LZ, weapons slung, rucks dragging us down into the mud as the bird spooled up and vanished into the black. The receiving line was short. A captain who looked like he'd been carved out of exhaustion, and a platoon sergeant with eyes that didn't blink enough. The CO shook hands without smiling. "Welcome to Echo," he said. "Rules are simple. Stay inside the wire unless you're on mission. Keep your weapon on you at all times. And don't borrow trouble you don't understand." They marched us through the gate, past coils of concertina and HESCO barriers draped in vines that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. The base wasn't large, maybe a few dozen structures clustered around a central helipad, but everything felt pressed in, suffocated by the green wall that rose on every side. You could hear the jungle breathing out there, a constant low rustle of leaves and insects that never stopped, day or night. They put us in Barracks Block C, the oldest concrete building on the FOB. 2 stories, flat roof, narrow windows like gun slits. The walls were painted that faded desert tan that never quite matches anywhere except deployment. And the whole place carried a permanent smell of damp concrete, gun oil, and mildew. Rows of metal racks lined the open bays, mosquito nets hanging like surrender flags. The floor was polished by 1,000 pairs of boots, but still showed dark stains no amount of scrubbing ever removed. As we dropped our kits, the platoon sergeant gathered the new arrivals in the center aisle. He was a stocky E7 with a chew bulge in his lip and a voice like gravel. "Listen up," he said. "This block's been here since the base stood up. It's seen every rotation. Lights out at 2200. No exceptions. Fire guard walks the hours, 2-man. And one more thing." He paused, scanning our faces. "If you hear footsteps on the second floor after everyone's accounted for, boots pacing slow, like someone pulling security, don't go investigating. Rack out. It's not your shift." A couple of the guys chuckled, the kind of nervous laugh you get when you're too tired to process anything else. I figured it was the standard hazing for F&Gs. Every post has its ghost story: black mold, sleep deprivation, generators humming at just the right frequency to mess with your head. That first night settled in heavy. The heat didn't drop, just thickened. Fans spun overhead, but only pushed the wet air around. I lay on my rack staring at the underside of the mosquito net, listening to the unfamiliar symphony of a new jungle. Insects screaming, something large moving through the canopy outside the wire, distant thunder that never quite turned into rain. Around 0200, I came awake fast, heart already pounding. Boots. Clear, deliberate footsteps overhead on the second floor. Thud. Pause. Thud pause. like a soldier in full kit walking a slow patrol. I sat up. The bay was quiet except for the usual snoring and shifting. Moonlight through the windows painted everything in silver and shadow. I grabbed my M4, slipped on my boots without lacing them, and moved to the stairwell. The metal steps were cool under my hand. I climbed slow, muzzle up, pieing the corner at the top. The second floor bay was empty. Racks stripped bare, footlockers gone, dust thick on the floor. No prints. No sign anyone had been up here in months. The pacing had stopped the moment I reached the landing. I stood there a minute, listening. Nothing but the jungle outside. Then I went back down, told myself it was settling concrete or rats or my own blood rushing in my ears. Morning formation came too soon. We stood in the gravel outside the barracks while the platoon sergeant called the roll. When he finished, I found Ramirez, a specialist with a faded 101st patch on his Velcro, sipping coffee from a cracked mug that read, "World's okayest soldier." "Hey man," I said, keeping my voice low. "What's the deal with the second floor? I heard someone walking fire guard up there last night." Ramirez didn't laugh. He just looked at me over the rim of his mug, eyes flat. "Yeah, that's the old patrol. They say it's the squad that got hit outside the wire a few years back. Ambush. Never recovered all the bodies. Jungle keeps what it takes." "Come on," I said. "It's probably the AC or pipes or something." He shrugged. "Keep telling yourself that. First week here, everybody's a skeptic. Second week, you stop asking questions. Third week, you sleep with your light on like the rest of us." That afternoon, we drew weapons, zeroed, and prepped for our first patrol outside the wire. The jungle beyond the perimeter was triple canopy, thick enough that daylight barely reached the ground. Visibility 20 meters on a good day. The point man moved like he expected the trees themselves to open fire. Half a click out, he froze, hand up. We stacked, muzzles covering arcs. Over the radio, his whisper. "Contact left." We scanned. Nothing. Just vines swaying in a breeze we couldn't feel. Then it came low, almost swallowed by the insects. Murmured voices. American accents. Fragments of radio chatter, old call signs, grid coordinates that hadn't been used since the base first stood up, phantom traffic on a net that wasn't transmitting. We called it in. Higher came back with the standard line. Atmospheric interference, solar activity, whatever excuse fit the day. We exfiled quiet. Nobody talking. Back inside the wire that evening, 3 guys from our platoon put in requests for behavioral health evals. Nightmares. They wrote on the forms. Nobody said anything about footsteps. That night the pacing started again. Same rhythm. Same slow, deliberate patrol. Only this time, it didn't stop when someone climbed the stairs. It just kept walking. And somewhere in the dark, a voice I didn't recognize whispered my last name like it had been waiting for me to arrive. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Wire. My name is Sergeant First Class Marcus Hale. I took over as inchoate for Block B during the 2013 rotation. The unit we replaced looked like they'd been through a meat grinder, guys with 1,000-yard stares, jumping at every shadow, packing out like the base was on fire. Nobody said goodbye. They just loaded the birds and disappeared into the sky. Block B was one of the newer structures. Prefab panels elevated on stilts to keep the flooding out during monsoon season. Cleaner than the old concrete blocks, better airflow, actual windows that opened. But the jungle didn't care about upgrades. Vines still crawled up the supports like they were trying to pull the whole building back into the green. At night you could hear things brushing against the underside of the floor, branches, or something heavier. I pulled staff duty more than my share because the younger NCOs kept finding reasons to be somewhere else after dark. One monsoon night the rain came down so hard it felt like the sky was trying to drown us. The tin roof amplified every drop into incoming artillery. Power flickered constantly, generators groaning under the load. I did my rounds through the bays, checking locks, making sure nobody had left a window cracked wide enough for something to slip through. Around 0300, I was in the lower bay when I heard it whispering. Close. Right outside the wire. Underneath the HESCO barriers on the south side. Low voices, male, American accents. Not the local dialect you'd expect from insurgents probing the perimeter. These were our voices. I froze, hand on my M4, and keyed the handheld. Tower 3. This is Hale. You got eyes on the south perimeter. Anything moving? The tower came back clear and calm. Negative, Sergeant. Thermal's clean. just rain and mud. But the whispering didn't stop. It grew clearer, like the speakers were walking the wire parallel to the building. I caught fragments, grid coordinates, old call signs, someone calling for a medevac that never came. The same kind of chatter you hear on a hot net during a TIC, except we weren't in contact and nobody was transmitting. I stepped out onto the covered porch between the blocks, rain blowing sideways, flashlight cutting a tunnel through the dark. I swept the beam across the wire, the mud, the tree line 20 meters out. Nothing. Just sheets of water and the glint of concertina wire. Then one voice cut through the rest, sharp and close enough that I felt it in my chest. They're still out there, waiting for extract. I spun. Empty porch behind me. No footprints in the puddles. Nothing. Morning came gray and dripping. I pulled the historical logs from the S2 shop. Incident reports going back to when the base first stood up. Took me most of the day to find it. Buried in a classified folder. 2008. A 6-man recon team went out on a 3-day mission and never came back. Last transmission reported movement in the tree line, figures matching friendly uniforms. Then static. Search parties found shredded gear, blood trails that ended at the roots of banyan trees, no bodies. Officially listed as presumed KIA, 'cause unknown. The jungle took them. After that, the whispers became part of the nightly routine. Guys would wake up gasping, swearing someone had been right next to their rack, breathing on them, murmuring their names. One private from 3rd Platoon came to me shaking. Said he woke to a soldier in old DCU standing at the foot of his bed, face hidden in shadow, but the voice was clear. He knew my hometown, the kid said. Asked if my mom still worked at the diner on Main Street. Nobody here knows that. We started leaving the bay lights on all night. Didn't help much. The power surges got worse, outages always hit between 0200 and 0400, plunging everything into black. During those blackouts, the whispers moved inside. You'd hear them in the latrine, in the stairwell, under the racks. Always the same theme. Unfinished business, waiting for relief that wasn't coming. Personal items started disappearing. Not the usual lost in the laundry stuff. Dog tags left on pillows that didn't belong to anyone currently assigned to the platoon. A faded patrol cap placed neatly on a footlocker, sweat-stained, name tape reading a guy who'd rotated home 2 years earlier. One morning we found an entire ruck assembled in the center aisle, packed like for patrol, weapon slung, but no owner. The name tape on it belonged to a soldier from that missing 2008 team. I reported it up the chain. The CO listened, face unreadable, then told me to inventory gear and move on. Stress manifests in different ways, Sergeant, he said. Keep the men focused on the mission. But we all knew. The wire wasn't keeping something out. It was keeping something in. And whatever it was, it knew every one of us by name. Chapter 3. The Empty Bay. Specialist Lena Torres, Commo Section. I ran the TOC out of the old admin building that was tacked onto the original barracks block in 2014. The structure dated back farther than anything else on the FOB. Thick poured concrete, narrow firing slits for windows, rebar showing through cracks like bones. Rumor was it started life as a Japanese stronghold during World War II, then got passed around like a bad habit until we inherited it. Perfect for a tactical operations center. Hardened, central, easy to defend. Terrible for sleeping, working, or staying sane. The ground floor had a bay that had been sealed off after a bad flood years earlier. Officially it was storage, old filing cabinets, broken chairs, crates of obsolete equipment nobody wanted to ship home. In practice, nobody went in there unless they absolutely had to, and never alone. The door stayed padlocked, chain thick enough to tow a Humvee. Even the platoon sergeants avoided it when they did their walkthroughs. One night shift, the radios started acting up. Static bleeding across every net. Fragments of voice traffic that didn't match any of our call signs. The backup generator in the sealed bay fed part of the commo rack. So I drew the short straw. I grabbed a flashlight, my sidearm, and the master key ring from the duty desk. The chain came off with a rattle that echoed too loud in the empty corridor. The door stuck at first, warped from humidity. When it gave, the smell rolled out. Wet earth, rust, and something sweet rotten underneath. I swept the light across the room. Rows of metal racks still bolted to the floor, mattresses long gone. Just springs and shadows. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Water stains climbed the walls in dark tides. In the far corner sat the generator, silent and cold. I moved toward it, boots crunching on grit and broken glass. Halfway across the bay I froze. Movement. Something shifting in the corner of my vision. A figure sat on one of the lower racks. Male. Uniform soaked through. Clinging to him like he'd just crawled out of a rice paddy. Helmet gone. Hair plastered to his skull. He was looking straight at me. I brought the light up. His face was wrong, skin gray pale. Eyes sunken so deep they looked like empty sockets catching the beam. Water dripped from his sleeves onto the concrete. Even though the roof above him was bone dry, he opened his mouth. The voice that came out was a rasp, like lungs full of mud. "Help us. We're still siege." The words hit me harder than any contact report. I backed up fast, shoulder slamming the doorframe, and yanked the door shut behind me. Locked it with shaking hands. The duty NCO found me in the corridor 10 minutes later, sitting against the wall trying to slow my heart rate. Next morning maintenance went in to check the generator. They came out quiet. Bay was empty, they said. No figure. No water on the floor. Nothing out of place. But someone noticed fresh scratches on the far wall. Letters and numbers gouged deep into the concrete like they'd been done with a bayonet. Grid coordinates. I looked them up later. Exact spot where an armored convoy got hit in 2011. Ambush. No survivors. After that, the sealed bay wouldn't stay sealed. Fire guard walking the admin building would radio in that the padlock was hanging open, chain coiled on the floor like a dead snake. They'd secure it again, do another lap, come back 20 minutes later, open. Lights on inside. Even though the breaker had been pulled years ago, voices started leaking out at night. Not whispers this time, full conversations. Old mission briefs, arguing about routes and exfil times. Someone calling for fire support on a net that hadn't existed since we switched to digital. You could stand in the corridor and hear a platoon leader giving an operations order for a patrol that happened before most of us even enlisted. One lieutenant, newly arrived, full of West Point confidence, decided to clear it up. He took 2 Joes and a video camera, kicked the door in at 1400 hours when the sun was high and the building was full of people. They were inside maybe 5 minutes. He came out alone. The camera was gone. His face was the color of the concrete walls. There were dozens of them. He told the CO later, voice flat. Lined up in formation along the racks. Full kit. Waiting for orders. None of them turned when we came in. Just stared straight ahead, like they'd been standing there since the day they died. We boarded the door up after that. 2x4s, nails, the whole thing. Painted over it, stenciled storage. Keep OUT in big black letters. Didn't matter. The voices still came through the wood. Muffled, but clear enough to make out names. Our names. Calling roll for a formation that would never end. How many men were still trapped in that bay, waiting for relief that was never coming? And how long before they started calling for the rest of us to fall in? Chapter 4. Shadows on patrol. Staff Sergeant Kyle Brennan, Infantry. I ran QRF out of Echo in 2015. We were the ones who rolled out whenever a patrol got pinned. Whenever the wire reported movement that turned out to be more than monkeys or wind. The real dread didn't come from the insurgents. It came from heading back inside the wire at dusk, boots caked in red mud, knowing the barracks were waiting. After a 12-hour foot patrol, you'd stumble into the bay exhausted, strip off your kit, and collapse. Sleep hit like a hammer. But more and more guys started waking up the same way, sudden, heart racing, eyes locked on the foot of their rack. Shadows. Tall figures standing there. No faces, no details. Just black silhouettes cut out of the dim red light we kept on for night vision. They didn't move. They just watched. First time it happened to me. My squad leader shook me awake hard enough to leave bruises. "Brennan, you seeing this?" I sat up. 3 of them at the far end of the bay. Perfectly still, spaced like they were pulling security on us. The air around them was colder than the rest of the room. You could see your breath. We grabbed rifles, flipped off safeties, advanced down the aisle slow. Muzzles never wavered. 10 feet away the shadows rippled, thinned, and were gone. Like someone turned off a projector. But the cold stayed behind, hanging in the air long after. We checked the doors, the windows, the roof access. Everything secure. No footprints in the dust outside. Nothing on the tower thermals. Just another entry in the duty log. Unexplained anomaly, barracks interior. After that, the shadows got bolder. Guys reported them closer. Standing over racks. Leaning in like they were checking pulse points. One private woke up screaming because he felt fingers on his neck. No marks, but he swore they were ice cold. Then they started following us outside the wire. On patrol, you'd catch movement in your peripheral. Tall shapes pacing us through the underbrush, keeping perfect interval like a flanking element. You'd swing your muzzle, slice the pie, and there'd be nothing but vines and shadows that didn't quite match the sunlight filtering through the canopy. One night, we got spun up for a TIC, patrol 2 clicks out reporting heavy contact. We loaded fast, rolled hot. By the time we arrived, the shooting had stopped. The supported element said the insurgents broke contact suddenly, melted into the jungle like they'd never been there. We swept the area, found spent casings, ours only, blood trails that ended abruptly at tree trunks. No bodies, no drag marks, no enemy gear. Back at the FOB, the patrol leader pulled me aside. "They weren't shooting at us, Brennan," he said. "They were shooting at something behind us." That same rotation, we lost a man. Not to enemy fire. We were on a routine presence patrol, halted for a map check. He was there 1 minute, covering his sector. Next head count, he was gone. No shot, no shout, nothing. We searched grid by grid until dusk forced us back. Found him hours later, sitting against a banyan tree 10 meters off the trail. Weapon across his lap, eyes open, staring at nothing. They called me. He kept repeating on the medevac bird. Said it was my turn to stand watch. Said the lines then. He got evac'd stateside for psych. Never returned to duty. The shadows didn't stay in the barracks anymore. They walked with us. During live fire training, they'd appear at the tree line, watching. During PT, they'd stand at the edge of the clearing while we rocked. Always silent. Always waiting. One firefight, we pushed an ambush site hard. Suppressive fire, bounding, the whole book. Insurgents returned fire sporadic, then nothing. When we assaulted through, the positions were empty. Bunkers cold, like the enemy had evaporated. But in the dirt, we found boot prints. American tread patterns, leading deeper into the jungle and stopping dead, like the wearers had just stepped out of existence. I started wondering if we were still fighting the living, or if the jungle had been recruiting all along, filling ranks that never rotated home. Because every patrol, we came back 1 man shorter in some way we couldn't put on a report. Eyes a little emptier, sleep a little lighter. Chapter 5. The night the lights went out, Corporal Alex Rivera. I was part of the last full rotation before they started pulling the plug on FOB Echo in 2016. The base was already winding down, units rotating out faster than they came in. Equipment crated up, whole sections of the wire going dark. You could feel the place letting go, like a dying animal rolling over to show its belly to the jungle. Vines moved in overnight, covering doors, climbing through broken windows. The air smelled less like gun oil and more like wet leaves and rot. My platoon drew the short straw for the final weeks. Skeleton crew holding the fort, while the rear detachment prepped for full decommissioning. Most nights it was just us, a handful of support guys, and whatever was left of the local security detail. Quiet enough that you could hear the jungle digesting the base 1 concrete chunk at a time. Then came the storm. It rolled in off the sea just after dusk. Black clouds stacked like artillery rounds. Lightning walking across the sky in sheets. Wind howled through the canopy hard enough to bend the taller trees parallel to the ground. Rain didn't fall so much as explode sideways, turning the whole FOB into a shallow lake within minutes. The power grid took the first hit. Transformers popped like small arms fire, and the main lights died across the compound. Generators kicked in automatic, but one by one they started failing. Flooded intakes. Fuel lines clogged with debris. By 2200, we were running on whatever portable units hadn't drowned yet. By midnight, even those were sputtering. Total blackout. No red lights in the base. No glow from the TOC. No tower spots sweeping the wire. Just the storm and whatever light the lightning felt like giving us. That's when the barracks woke up. It started with footsteps. Every block at once. Heavy boots on concrete, on metal stairs, on the catwalks overhead. Not one set, not 2 dozens. Like every rotation that had ever billeted there decided to stand to at the same moment. Doors we'd nailed shut years ago slammed open and shut in rhythm with the thunder. Windows rattled in frames that hadn't moved in decades. Guys spilled out of their racks half-dressed, weapons up, forming hasty security in the aisles. We shouted challenges down corridors that came back empty. Radios crackled with traffic that wasn't ours, old call signs, frantic demands for CAS, Medevac birds that had been retired before I enlisted. Then the screaming started. Not human at first, more like metal tearing, wind forced through a throat that wasn't there. But it shaped itself into words, into pain, coming from the old concrete blocks, the ones closest to the original wire. Agonized voices layered on top of each other, calling out names, grid coordinates, pleading for extraction that never arrived. We moved as a platoon to clear the sounds, standard building clearing tactics, bounding overwatch, flashlights cutting tunnels through the dark. Every bay we entered was empty, but the cold hit you like walking into a freezer. Breath hung in front of your face, even though the air outside was still 90 degrees and soaked. We reached Block C, the oldest, the one nobody lived in anymore, and found blood. Fresh. Bright arterial red smeared across the floor in drag marks. Handprints climbing the walls like someone had tried to claw their way out. Pools in the center, all reflecting our flashlight beams. No bodies. No wounds on any of us. Just blood that hadn't been there at morning formation. The smells came next: cordite, diesel, burning meat. Phantom smoke that stung your eyes and coated the back of your throat. One of the younger guys lost it then. Private First Class Howell. Good kid, steady on patrol. He dropped his weapon, bolted past us, and ran straight into the storm. We chased him to the gate, shouting his name over the wind. But he vaulted the HESCOs and vanished into the tree line like the jungle opened up and swallowed him whole. We searched until the rain eased at dawn. Found him 50 meters outside the wire, hanging from a thick vine wrapped tight around his neck. No drop, no struggle marks in the mud. Just suspended there, boots 6 inches off the ground. Eyes wide open, staring back toward the barracks. His mouth was moving. Not breathing, just lips forming words we couldn't hear. Coroner later called it suicide. No note, no history. Clean cut. We knew better. When the sun finally came up, the blood was gone. Floors dry, walls clean. Like the storm had washed it all away. Generators coughed back to life one by one. The base looked almost normal in the gray morning light. But as the last bird spun up to pull us out for good, I stood on the LZ looking back at the compound. The jungle had already closed half the gaps in the wire. Vines waved in the rotor wash like they were saying goodbye. And in the shadows of the barracks doorways, figures. Dozens of them. Lined up in formation. Uniforms from every era we'd occupied the place. Not waving. Watching. Making sure we left. Or making sure we understood we never really did. The siege didn't end when we flew out. Chapter 6. Echoes from the overgrown wire. Master Sergeant David Kwan. I drew the worst card in the deck. Rear Detachment, 2017. The very last handful of us left behind after the main body flew out. Our job was to strip what remained. Destroy classified material, demo sensitive structures, pack out anything worth salvaging, and turn the keys over to whatever came next. Officially, the base was being handed back to the host nation. Unofficially, everybody knew the jungle would have it long before any paperwork changed hands. By the time we started the final sweep, FOB Echo didn't look like a military installation anymore. Vines had punched through walls, rooted in the floors, and flowered blood red across rooftops. The helipad was a pond. Concertina wire sagged under the weight of creepers thick as pythons. Whole sections of the perimeter had vanished. Swallowed so completely you could walk 10 feet off the old trail and never know a base had been there. The air was thick with spores and the sweet stink of things decomposing faster than the eye could follow. We worked in daylight when we could, because nights belonged to something else. I kept a small team, 5 of us, plus a couple contractors who spoke less every day. We billeted in what was left of the newest prefab block, the one least reclaimed. Even there the walls sweated green. At night we pulled 2-man fire guard, weapons loaded, NVGs charged. Not for insurgents. Nobody had seen a living enemy in months. The radios were supposed to be cold, antennas pulled, batteries removed. But they still talked. First night alone on the FOB, I was in the TOC burning hard drives, when the singers on the desk lit up. No power cord, no battery pack, just green backlight and squelch breaking. Old traffic. Fragments of ARs from patrols I'd read about in the classified logs. Someone calling in a 9-line that ended in screams. Coordinates that matched every lost team the base had ever sent out. I yanked the handset, keyed it. Whoever this is, knock it the hell off. Static. Then a voice calm and close, like the speaker was standing behind me. Holding the line, Sergeant. waiting for relief. I cleared the building with my weapon up. Empty. Dust on the floor except for one set of boot prints leading to the wall and stopping dead. After that, the radios never stayed silent. You'd hear them in your sleep. Traffic from rotations long gone. Call signs of units that had redeployed years earlier. Sometimes they used our call signs. Our names. The thermals started picking up signatures too. We still had a few mounted on the remaining towers for perimeter security. Cold spots moving against the warm backdrop of the jungle. Human-shaped. Walking slow patrols along the inside of the wire that wasn't there anymore. They never crossed the thresholds of the buildings we still occupied. Just walked the old routes. Over and over. Like muscle memory etched into the ground itself. One afternoon, we torched the last of the classified docks in a burn pit behind the old admin building. Wind shifted and carried the smoke straight through the sealed bay, the one that had been boarded up years before. The boards were gone now, rotted away or pulled down by vines. I glanced inside out of habit. Dozens of dog tags hung from the ceiling on paracord, swaying gentle in the breeze that shouldn't have reached that far inside, gleaming like they'd just been issued. I stepped closer. Names from every rotation. Some I recognized from the wall of the fallen in the chow hall. Others were guys still alive, walking around stateside, coaching Little League or drinking beer in some VFW post. Mine was in the center, polished, waiting. I cut them all down, stuffed them in a cargo pocket, and never told the team. Last night on Echo, I did a final walkthrough alone. Moon was full, light filtering green through the canopy. The base looked like ancient ruins, concrete blocks half sunk into the earth, rebar twisted like ribs. As I passed Block C, I heard it complete. The siege in full. Artillery thumps rolling in from distances that didn't exist anymore. Tracers arcing silent across the sky. Impacts walking the perimeter in perfect sequence. Voices shouting corrections, adjusting fire, calling good effect on target over nets long dead. I ran to the LZ where our bird was spooling up for the final extract. Didn't look back until we lifted. From the air, the fortress was almost gone. Just darker patches in the green where the jungle hadn't quite erased the scars. But the lights were on. Every window, every doorway that still had glass or frame glowed soft amber. Like the generators had kicked back to life one last time. Figures lined the old wire. Hundreds now. Every uniform the base had ever worn. Standing shoulder to shoulder. Not waving. Holding the line. The pilot banked hard. Climbing fast to clear the canopy. Below us the lights winked out one by one, block by block, until only the jungle remained. They didn't need us anymore. The siege goes on without relief. And it always will. Chapter 7. The Fortress That Never Fell. Lieutenant Colonel James Harlan, retired. I commanded FOB Echo from 2014 through 2016. 2 full years in that green hole. Longer than any other CO before or after. I signed the orders, read every after-action review, sat in on every behavioral health briefing, and personally approved every redacted incident report that left my desk. We lost good men there. Some to ambushes, IEDs, disease, the usual hazards of that kind of fight, but not all. The others we lost to something the official record could never acknowledge. It started slow. A private here, a specialist there. Requests for emergency leave that didn't quite add up. Psych evacs for acute stress reaction that read more like breakdowns. Refusal of second tours from soldiers who'd re-enlisted twice before. Whispers in the command tent about footsteps, shadows, voices calling from the tree line. I dismissed most of it at first. Isolation, combat fatigue, mold spores messing with heads already running on fumes. We were fighting a real enemy. I needed my men focused outward, not chasing ghosts inside the wire. But the reports kept coming. Too many. Too consistent. Details that matched across platoons that had never spoken to each other. I started digging on my own, pulling old logs, talking to the longest-serving NCOs off the record, walking the barracks alone at night when the generators dipped and the jungle pressed closest. What I found wasn't in any field manual. The island had history long before we carved our FOB out of it. Japanese garrison in World War II. Dug in deep, concrete bunkers, tunnels, the works. They held it for years against everything we threw at them. When the end came, it wasn't surrender. Orders were to fight to the last. Thousands went into those jungles and fortifications. Almost none came out. Massacres, Starvation, disease, some say worse. Bodies left where they fell, or buried in pits the rain erased decades ago. We built Echo right on top of it. Same ground. Same concrete in places. Same sight lines. Our presence didn't disturb the dead. It woke them. They weren't angry. Not vengeful like in the stories. They were waiting. Still executing their last orders. Hold the position. Maintain the perimeter. Deny the enemy. Only now there was no enemy left to fight except time itself. And we walked in wearing the wrong uniforms, speaking the wrong language, acting like the siege was over. So they recruited. Not all at once. A voice here. A shadow there. A name called in the dark. Just enough to make you doubt. Then more. Until the line between the living rotation and the permanent one blurred. I saw it happen to good soldiers. Men I'd trust with my life in a firefight. They'd come back from patrol quieter. Sleep less. Volunteer for extra fire guard. Start talking about holding the line like it was still 1945. Some requested transfer to rear detachment when the base started closing. Stayed behind when everyone else flew out. I signed those orders too. When my own tour ended, I stood on the LZ watching the bird lift. Looked down at the compound shrinking below. The jungle had already started closing the gaps, but along the old wire figures. Straight lines. Perfect intervals. Every era of uniform we'd ever worn there, side by side with ones we hadn't. They weren't seeing us off. They were waiting for the next relief. Thousands of us entered that fortress over the years. Rotations in, rotations out. Almost none returned unchanged. Some never returned at all. The records are sealed. The base is gone. Maps don't show it anymore. But if you know where to look, on certain satellite passes, you can still see the outline, the straight lines that don't match any natural clearing. The fortress never fell. It just changed flags. And the siege goes on. If you ever served at Echo, if you heard the footsteps, saw the shadows, felt the cold that didn't belong, you already know. You're still on the roster. Somewhere out there, they're still calling your name, waiting for you to stand your watch.